Australians can visit the Treasury and Finance Department website and see the independent analysis and verification for 22 coalition policies. But if they go looking for any Labor policies, they won't find them. No Labor policies have been submitted to Treasury and Finance or the Parliamentary Budget Office during the course of this election campaign for analysis, confirmation and publication. 22 coalition policies, fully costed, fully verified, versus 0 Labor policies that have been costed or verified. It's a demonstration of our commitment to the integrity of our budget process and our costings process. Mr Albanese is being tricky with Labor's policies and costings. Mr Albanese and the Labor Party are seeking to hide the full extent of their spending in this election campaign. And that can be seen by the different nature of the promises that Labor is making through this election campaign. The Labor Party have announced some $21 billion of obvious on-budget spending commitments. That includes $5.4 billion for just stage 1 of their childcare promises. It includes $2.5 billion for the aged care nurses that they admit they can't find and don't know where they'll come from. It includes $135 million for the care clinics that they announced in the first week of the election campaign, where Mr Albanese said it was a fully costed policy by the Parliamentary Budget Office, only to have his shadow finance minister admit that it wasn't actually costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office. He's had weeks since then to lodge that policy for costing, and he's not done so. The $21 billion even includes things such as $20,000 for Lisa Chester to build a frog bog in her electorate, or $5,000 for Mark Dreyfus to pursue mindful matters. But this isn't the full extent of Labor's policy spending. There's $52 billion worth of so-called off-budget spending measures. These are measures that will add to Australia's debt, and if you look at the way Labor is running around the country, from their $15 billion so-called National Reconstruction Fund, it's clear whether they're promising electric buses or other manufacturing facilities that many of these so-called off-budget commitments aren't really off-budget and would add to the budget bottom line impact in terms of Labor's extra spending. Their $10 billion National Housing Fund, which of course is actually a forced-to-sell fund for Australians who get a wage rise or get ahead in life, and again, a lack of clarity about what costs they've truly factored in for the extent of that fund. But then we see the nod and a wink promises that Labor's making around the country to Labor states, to unions and to others. $31 billion worth of potential additional spending to meet the demands of teachers' union and state governments in relation to schools. You can see that as Tanya Plibersek and others give a nod and a wink and say, oh yes, we'll do more, we'll negotiate, we'll give more as a government, but they're not saying transparently what the costs of that will be. The same applies in relation to hospitals funding, where whenever asked about going to 50% growth in the costs of hospital funding, Mr Albanese once again gives a nod and a wink to the unions, to the states, indicates there'll be a pushover, and even in the course of the last week actually committed to 50% funding of a hospital project. It's $61 billion potential worth of extra exposure in Gillard-era style structural spending growth across the budget. And then there's the $302 billion worth of platform promises from the Labor Party. Vague, aspirational spending promises, which again, when Mr Albanese is pushed, he never gives a straight answer on. Take, for example, the $82 billion exposure to meet Labor's platform promises on JobSeeker. Mr Albanese says that with JobSeeker, he wouldn't do anything in the first Labor budget. But what about the second or third Labor budgets? Where's the commitment there? That adds potentially tens of billions of dollars to Labor's debt and deficit.